I wish that I could swim and sleep like a shark does. I'd fall to the bottom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Comprehensible Input podcast, where we have interesting conversations with interesting people about interesting topics in English that we can all understand. Today, we're talking about living in another country and life in Spain, and our very special guest today is Tom. Tom, hello.
Hello, Glenn. Nice to be with you.
Nice to be with you too. Before we get into living abroad and life in Spain, can you just tell us something about yourself and some of the different places where you've lived?
Yes, certainly. I'm 46 years old. I'm on the edge of the nomad generation, also known as Generation X, and I think that characterizes me and certainly my younger years because I've lived and worked in 10 different countries on 6 continents. Shall I run through them in chronological order? Or
Yeah, go on. I think we have time.
Okay. Australia, the United States, Tanzania, Portugal, Kuwait, Brazil, Dubai, Russia, and Spain, where I've lived now for the last 12 years.
Amazing. And are you planning to stay in Spain for the foreseeable future, in the near future?
Yes, I think so. Now I'm here with my wife. I have 2 young children. One of them is in school, and we're very settled. We feel very comfortable here, but never say never. We're living in interesting times, so who knows what the future holds.
Now, I first moved abroad when I was 25 years old. I think that was a good age. How old were you when the first country you lived in, you said, was the USA, right?
It was Australia, actually. I failed my A-level exams, which are the exams you take when you're 18. I say failed. I did okay, but I didn't get the grades I needed to go to my first choice of university. So I did a gap year, which was just becoming popular at the time. It's where you take a break between school and university. I worked at a bank in Cambridge, and then I travelled to South Africa and stopped in Sydney, Australia for 6 months to work. So 19 was the age when I got the travel bug and the desire to sort of expand my horizons and see the world.
I was a very young 19-year-old. I don't think I could have survived. I think 25 was the perfect age for me. Do you think there is a perfect age when you should move abroad? Do you think it is okay to do it when you're 19 years old?
I think it really depends on the person, and it depends on the choice of countries. When I was 19, I went to countries where, first of all, they spoke English, except, of course, Thailand and Malaysia at the end. But it was an establishing tourist destination, so you could get by speaking English in those places. But they were also fairly safe places, particularly Australia. I think it's one of the safest places to go travelling. So it does depend on the individual, the appetite for risk or adventure. And yes, for me it was the right time, but I guess that's a reflection of my personality as well.
You mentioned Australia is a very safe place. I think of sharks and snakes and big spiders. Did you see any of that scary kind of animal life?
Not so much. I was pretty much based in the city in Sydney for most of it. The last month I went travelling up the East Coast, and certainly when we got to Darwin in the Northern Territory, that's when we saw crocodiles out in the wild, and it started to get a bit more scary. We took a trip down the middle to Ayers Rock and Alice Springs as well. But I have to say, compared with other countries I've travelled to since, it felt like a very safe, comfortable environment.
Let's talk a little bit about living abroad in general then. So, firstly, why do we do this? Why do people do it? What are the biggest advantages of living in another country?
I would say there's 2 advantages. One of them is a kind of a negative advantage. It's a bit like that expression, no pain, no gain, they say about going to the gym and training hard. when you go to another country, you are putting yourself into a situation where you are forced to adapt, especially if it's a different language, if the culture is very different from what you're used to. So you either adapt yourself and overcome the obstacles which are easy to solve at home but are much greater in this new country, or you have to go back home with your tail between your legs, which means, feeling shameful and embarrassed. So that is one reason. It forces you to grow and improve, and it increases your resourcefulness. And I'd say the second reason is it's a bit like when you go shopping and you're trying on clothes. You're able to go and live in these different places and experience, you try on a new shirt, a new suit, and that's a bit like experiencing the culture, the lifestyle, and making comparisons. Inevitably, you compare the new place with your old place. What's better? What's worse? What do you like? What don't you like? And this helps you learn about yourself a lot more. And eventually, as has happened with me, you might find a country that you actually prefer living in to your home country. So it gives you the opportunity to experiment and feel what places suit you and fit you best.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point about, I feel like living abroad, you learn so much more about your home country, because when you grow up in the UK, you just think, okay, this is normal. You never think about it before until you move to another country and you see some of the different superstitions or customs or local traditions. And then you start to think about, well, why do we do this in the UK? Why don't we wash our hands as much as maybe some people in other countries do? It's an interesting thing. You mentioned there are some difficulties, like some obstacles that are a lot more challenging, a lot more difficult in other countries, but perhaps not as difficult in your home country. Can you give any examples of this?
Yes, it might be something as simple as a broken toilet, and you need to find a good plumber, but you don't know how to get the plumber. You might try through an insurance company or call locally. Excuse me. It might be something as simple as getting a telephone contract or declaring your taxes. Especially with the language barrier, all of these little problems become much more complicated. They push you into an area where you cannot be sure you're doing everything correctly. And then you need, I would say, the resourcefulness to build a team, to have people around you, friends or professionals, who can help you overcome these obstacles, which you would do automatically on your own in your home country.
Mm-hmm. Now, having met a lot of people who move abroad, you say part of it is adapting to that new culture, and part of it is facing those difficulties, with a positive mindset. Now, not everybody has that. I have heard of many people who suffer from something called culture shock, that they move to another country and then for whatever reason they hate it and they leave. What is culture shock? And do you think everybody experiences this when they move abroad?
I see culture shock as a kind of sensory overload, being overwhelmed by a new situation, and the unfamiliarity of the new environment causes you to strongly perhaps miss your home environment, feel homesick for the things which you know are there and you're used to. And as a result, it can kind of create a sort of a neuroses, which is a word for sort of like a mental issue for you, where you find it difficult to operate on a day-to-day basis. The example that comes to mind, I've never been to India, but people often say when you go to a big city in India, it is culture shock, because from the smells, the noises, the amount of people, all the senses are overwhelmed there. I did, to answer your question, does it affect everyone? I did see it in Africa. I was a volunteer teacher in Tanzania, and I saw that it was harder for some of the younger female teachers, particularly from Western countries like Canada or the United States or Europe, to adapt to this new environment where it might be more of a sort of a patriarchal structure, meaning, the men are in charge of the clan, the township, and the women have a secondary role. It's something which we've rejected in the West with modern feminism and equality. And I saw that some of the younger girls found it difficult to remain in these small towns and villages. They experienced culture shock, and sometimes they went home early. It wouldn't just be the girls, I'm sure. I don't want to sound sexist. I'm sure there were boys who suffer culture shock as well. But I think in this particular environment in Tanzania, I noticed it with a couple of girls.
Mm-hmm. I remember one instance in Moscow going back about 13 or 14 years. I was working as a language teacher in a language school, and we had one new teacher who came, and my friend was his housemate, and this guy he arrived at about 9 o'clock in the morning. My friend, he was going to live and stay in my friend's flat, and my friend welcomed him in the morning, said, "Hi, my name is Rick. Like, if you need anything, this is my phone number. Get in touch. I have to go and teach a class now, but I'll come back later and we'll, get to know each other and I'll show you around." When he came back in the evening, that guy had already flown back to America. Something happened. We have no idea, but the guy, he just couldn't handle it and he went back home. I do know a few instances of this with teachers who they don't say anything. They just disappear. Have you ever known this? People who just randomly disappear?
Yeah, I have. In the English language teaching business here, where we are in Almeria, or anywhere in the world, it's a fairly transient business, meaning that people come and go. There is a fast turnover meaning teachers being employed and then leaving the employment. That is very common anyway, because English language teaching does typically appeal to younger people who want to explore their horizons. But sometimes you see that the teacher has only survived a couple of weeks or a few months and they've been miserable. Their attitude has been very negative in the workplace or socializing. I don't blame the place, the environment of Almeria. In these particular instances, I think the teachers may have brought some problems, some issues with them. One of them had a broken heart. He had a Vietnamese girlfriend who betrayed him. Another one, she was an alcoholic, and she was in her 50s, but she was out clubbing. She'd come into work with a black eye from falling off a table, dancing on a bar or something. So often the lifestyle outside of the work or the environment can have an effect and cause these people to come and go quickly.
Yeah, and I think those people must regret it. I think, probably a couple of weeks later, they think like, why wasn't I just a little bit braver? Why couldn't I have just stayed a little bit longer? So what advice would you have for someone who is thinking about moving to another country, in order for them not to have this experience where they suddenly give up and go home immediately?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that it depends on the individual. I think it's harder if you are naturally a shy person, because it is harder to go out and make friends and put yourself into situations where you are socializing with new people and feeling comfortable. So in those instances, I would recommend using things like language exchange groups. They happen in most big cities, where you can find people who speak your language and local people who are coming together to practice speaking your language. If you speak English, it's very easy to find these groups. They can give you we say a foot in the door, an idiom meaning they can give you an entrance into a new social life and an environment. But yes, I think really to use a Jordan Peterson quote. For the people who don't know who Jordan Peterson is, he's a Canadian psychologist, and one of his famous expressions is, "You have to clean your own room first." And really, if you're you have to ask yourself, are you coming to a new environment because you want to really immerse yourself and embrace the new culture, or are you trying to escape from some problems back home? And to make it work, really, if it is the latter, you're escaping problems, you need to work through those issues if you are going to be successful in the new place.
Yeah, I think, always, I don't really have a lot of advice myself. I think that is a really good point that you make, to make sure that you are ready for this before you make that decision. But I'm always a big believer that we should never make important decisions when we're very high or when we're very low. That we should always give ourselves, 24 hours, sleep on it, don't make those rash decisions. But I think, living abroad is an incredible thing. And I think everybody should do it at some point in their life, even if it's just for, 6 months or a year or something. However, leaving our home country might have some disadvantages too. And is there anything you miss about living in the UK?
Yes, I miss the greenery. The greenery, I'm just talking about the landscape, the scenery of the UK. I do go back at Christmas, sometimes in the summers, and the contrast is stark. Stark meaning very extreme, very vivid, because here in this corner of Andalusia, it's more arid, more desert-like conditions. There are palm trees, there's sand, there's a lot of dirt, a lot of kind of brown everywhere, light brown colours. Go back to England and it's lush, it's green, it's the greenery, the nature is something I really enjoy. The English countryside. I have to say though, I don't miss a huge amount now, and that's partly because I'm probably nostalgic for the England of 30 years ago. The England of when I grew up, when I was 18. This may be a reflective of my own mentality at the time. I felt free, liberated. England was or the United Kingdom was in a stronger place economically, culturally. It felt like an exciting time to be there. This isn't a podcast about the downfall of the United Kingdom, so I'm not going to go into it, but I have noticed that there have been significant changes in the United Kingdom, and I feel like it's an easier life for me here in Spain, even though my salary is far less, less than half of what I could expect to earn in the United Kingdom. I'm still able to enjoy myself much more.
It's interesting. Maybe because we're both the same age, we both have this nostalgia for the 90s, but I was thinking of making a whole episode on this podcast about stuff from the 90s, because I truly believe it was the best decade. But maybe that's because, I was young in that time. But let's get on to let's move on to talking about life in Spain. And so you mentioned you're living in Spain now. You've been there for a while. You're in a place called Almeria. Is that right?
Almeria,
sorry about that. So in comparison with other countries, you've lived in many different places, Portugal, Tanzania, Australia, Russia. How easy is it to live in Spain?
It's a very interesting question, and it really depends on the needs of the person. I would say it can be remarkably easy, especially for a European, because Spain has had a very welcoming immigration policy, particularly towards Northern European countries. So you can go and find your expat community and live with those people in Spain, in I think every region of Spain. There are many of them here in Andalusia, and you can have your own kind of microeconomy of people and services, all in the English language. So I don't recommend this personally. I personally like the idea of integrating much more into a country to get the full benefits. I very much believe you should try to learn the language to the best of your ability. And if you are in your own bubble, your own expat bubble, then you're always going to be limiting yourself in this aspect, because you're going to be operating on a daily basis in English. But aside from the language, I would also say that Economically, it's easier to live a more active lifestyle out and about. Spain is an outdoor environment, particularly where I am. Almeria has the most hours of sunshine in Europe every year. So it means that life is spent on the streets, in cafes, in tapas bars, on the beach, lots of sports, and it needn't be expensive. It's not like going out in the United Kingdom where, you feel like you're being ripped off. That expression meaning, they are charging you more than the true value of what you're buying. Here you feel like you can enjoy yourself, eat out, drink out, spend time socializing with friends, and have money left over. It won't be much money to go traveling with to the wealthy Northern European countries, but I would say that Spain, for me personally, gives me a perfect balance between the things that are important to me. I've mentioned the outdoor lifestyle, being close to home. As you get older, you want to be closer to your parents if your parents are still alive. And I'm one flight away from my hometown, which is much easier than being in Australia or on the other side of the world. Yes, to compare with Kuwait and Dubai, these countries you can earn much more money. You have much more disposable income. But I found that because they are very new countries and because they are historically Muslim Islamic countries, there is a bit of a cultural gap. I don't want to use the word soulless because that sounds too extreme to say Dubai has no soul. But there is this element that you feel when you're in a very historic place where people have lived for 1,000 years, like this city, compared with a very new city, which is much more caught up in the materialism and the wealth. I'm talking about Dubai. So for that reason, I found Spain gives me a good balance. I'm never going to be a millionaire working as a teacher here, but you don't need to be. There's things you can enjoy without lots of money.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that the Spanish have quite a friendly attitude towards people migrating to Spain. However, I have seen in the news, not just recently, but I think for the last couple of years, some protests against something called over-tourism. Now, when I was growing up, a lot of, people in my hometown went on their holidays to Spain, places like Benidorm and Mallorca and Menorca, those Canary Isles, things like this. But I have seen even in Barcelona, people are protesting against this. What are they protesting against? And does that worry you as a foreigner in Spain?
Yes, you are right. This has been a dominant news story, a narrative on the news. Sometimes you see graffiti. This is a city for the locals. It's not for tourists. I think that what you're describing actually is a popular narrative for the politicians, but it doesn't really deal with the many factors that are causing high house prices or high rental prices in big cities. It's a popular narrative for politicians because they can point the finger and put the blame on these wealthy foreigners who just happen to not be able to vote in Spain, so they do not affect the popularity of the politicians, and it kind of creates the scapegoat, meaning the person who you give the blame to for something going wrong. In reality, I would say that the impact of tourism, probably the benefits outweigh the downsides. These cities do very, very well. Your Barcelonas, Benidorms, the Costa del Sol, the islands you mentioned. I believe the tourist economy is a huge sector in the Spanish economy, and the politicians would have big trouble if they were to make the laws so strict that they restricted the amount of tourism, because the tourist sector is a very powerful voting bloc. They can have a lot of influence. So it's a lot of words, it's a lot of finger pointing at the tourists, but what they never point the finger at is an issue they have here in Spain with ocupas. Now, are you familiar with this word, ocupa?
I guess it comes from occupy, but I don't know if it's about people with second homes or something like this. I don't know.
You're right. It comes from that cognate, occupy. In English, we have the word squatter, a squatter describing a person who is living in a residence without paying rent. And in Spain, it's very common. There are many, many occupas. There are two types. There are the types who will break into a house. They will see that it might be a second home, a holiday home, and they will break in and they will claim that the door was open, the window was open, and now they are staying there. Or another common type of occupa will sign a rental contract to come and stay in an apartment. And then after about 2 or 3 months, I think there's a probation period of 3 months, they stop paying their rent. They will say, "Oh, I lost my job. This problem has happened." Excuse me. And this causes a major problem for the landlords because the Spanish legal system is long, is expensive, it's tedious, it's very stressful for landlords to evict meaning to kick these people out of their properties. And as a result, you find that many landlords would much rather rent their property if they have a second home or a flat somewhere. They would rather rent it on a short-term rental to a tourist because they have much less chance of the tourist, staying on and breaking the contract. So this is a big story in Spain. To me, it's as an Englishman, it seems outrageous. It's a violation of our property rights. If you don't have property, the Englishman's home is his castle. If you don't have the right to defend your home, then what country are you living in? I can see the angle from the politicians. It avoids a huge problem and a very expensive problem of homelessness for them. If they let the occupants stay for as long as possible, they don't need to deal with homeless people on the streets. But I would say this is a far bigger factor, or an equally large factor as tourists, renting out properties. But the politicians never talk about this.
Yeah, like politicians in many, 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 many countries. Let's get on to something maybe slightly more positive. Do you have any favorite Spanish holidays or festivals? I remember teaching a teenage group a while back, and there was some article in there about some Spanish, like Day of the Tomatoes or something, and people throwing tomatoes. Do you know what this festival is, and does this really happen? Do people really throw tomatoes at each other?
This particular one, I only have as much knowledge as you, Glyn. I think I've read it in an English teaching course book for students as well. But I am aware that it does exist. It's somewhere further north in Spain. It might be in the region of Valencia somewhere. But I can talk more generally about holidays because the Spanish are very favourable towards public holidays, or in England we call them bank holidays. And you will find that the school timetable is full of these gaps where they will put in, very conveniently, very well organised, a public holiday on a Thursday, and then a local holiday on a Friday, and then maybe sometimes they'll add one on the Monday as well. So during the academic year, you often find yourself with a sort of a 5-day break between studies. This, I don't know if it's true for all the regions, but in Andalusia, it's a very common thing to have lots of public holidays. And also every town, every village, every city will have big festivals, special celebration days. They may be historical events where they reenact important moments in history, like the Reconquista, the reconquest of Spain, taking it back from the Moors. Or they may be religious festivals. They may be sort of local cultural, agricultural festivals. But you will find that there's the opportunity in your social calendar to go and enjoy wonderful days in so many places in Spain. If you can say one thing about the Spanish, they love to have a party, and the holidays are there throughout the year, helping you to do so.
That's nice. I know in many countries, public holidays, those national holidays, they mean something, and they have a special celebration or a special event. I find that very often in the UK, a bank holiday is just a day off and you stay at home. Not all, of course, but I feel like so many of our bank holidays, they're just a day off, whereas in many other countries, they have special names and special celebrations. But yeah. And just one more thing about living in Spain before we move on to our quickfire round. Is it possible to live in Spain using only English, or do you think you need to learn some Spanish or maybe even Catalan living there?
It is possible to live in Spain using only English, or I could apply this to Russians. They could go to a community in the Costa del Sol near Malaga where it's Russian speaking only, and there's a Russian radio station. So it is possible to immerse yourself in your own linguistic bubble of your native language. However, it comes at a cost. We have a town just up the road from us here in the city of Almeria. It's called Mojácar. And Mojácar has a big expat, meaning a native British population. And when you do go there, you find that the cost of everything is about 50% more, roughly 50% more than you would spend in your local city, in the Spanish environment. I noticed this contrast between Gibraltar and crossing the line to the Spanish city on the border, Línea de la Concepción. So I think that if you want to stay in your own language, you probably have to work harder to find people who can help you. Like I mentioned, your plumber, your electrician, your handyman who will come and do these jobs. And if they speak English or they're serving an English-speaking community, then probably their fees are going to be 50% more than everyone else. But Spain is such an affordable country for British people. Many British people don't mind. They don't mind it at all.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fascinating. All right, so we're going to get on to our quickfire round. So now I'm going to ask you 10 questions, Tom, about either living in another country or about life in Spain. We'll keep our answers short in this one. First of all, what's an underrated place to visit? So a place that other people maybe don't think of as being a nice place to go to, but you think is great. And it could be a city or a country.
Wow, great question. Yes, I'm just scrolling my mind through the continents. My heart belongs in Africa. I would recommend for anyone to go and experience somewhere like Tanzania, where I was. I know it's now more established on the map for safaris. You've got Kenya next door to it, but there are countries around it: Rwanda, Malawi, Uganda. I would say East Africa.
And what's an overrated place to visit? So a place that everyone thinks is amazing and you think is maybe not that good?
Mm-hmm. This could apply to visiting many of the wonders of the world, and the Vatican, the Sistine Chapel springs to mind, being herded through like a sheep and having them shout, "No photos, no photos!" You're not really getting to enjoy the magnificent artwork of David. So I would say actually any highly rated tourist place where many tourists go is overrated.
And if you could spend a year living in any country, so obviously I understand you're settled in Spain, you have your family there, but just hypothetically, if you could spend a year living in any country, where would you go?
Argentina would be appealing. I think it's, I've never been, I've been to the border with Brazil, but I've never been into Argentina, but I have some very good Argentinian friends here in Spain. And I just think it's an incredibly rich, abundant country in turn. I'm not talking money, I'm talking in nature, in potential as well. It is a blessed country. So yes, Argentina.
I also have some desire to go to Argentina. There's a little Welsh community in Patagonia, and they have some Welsh language there, and it would be fascinating for me to go to. But anyway, this isn't about me. What's been your worst experience with bureaucracy?
Oof, wow. What comes to mind, I remember in crossing the border from Kenya to Tanzania, and they tried to, withhold our passports until we paid them a bribe. Luckily, I was with a very fiery Swiss girl who who got really angry, and we didn't pay anything more than we should have done. But generally, here I can say here in Spain, it can be pretty dreadful. I think if you ask a typical young Spanish person, what do you want to be when you finish school, finish university? They so often say a civil servant, funcionario, it's called in Spanish. It's baffling for an English person. Why do you want to work in this kind of job? But in Spain, they associate it with security, with an easy life, very difficult to lose your job. And when you go to one of these places like the immigration center in Almeria and you deal with some of these people, these staff members, you realize that they really are enjoying the easy life at your expense.
Siesta, good or bad?
More than good. Amazing. I mean, the siesta, actually, it's essential here in Andalusia, because especially now it's so hot. So between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock, it's a very slow time. Many businesses are closed anyway. But I think we need to do it in the north of Europe as well. I think we need to change our working week. We need to put little quiet sleep bedrooms into office buildings and give the staff a chance just to take 10 minutes, 20 minutes after they've had their lunch break, and you're rejuvenated, you're energized, and you're focused again. So yes, I'm a massive fan of the siesta.
Yeah, for anyone, I'm sure everybody knows what a siesta is, but for those who don't know, siesta is a little sleep, a little nap that you have during the day after lunch. Sounds like a nice idea. What's one British thing you wish they had in Spain, apart from the scenery?
Oh, probably I could pick out some things from the supermarket that I would like, but actually I think it's probably having your family. You know, I've got my sister living next door to my father, and I see how great it is for my niece and nephew to grow up with their grandparents close. So I would say having family with you in your environment. I say that, I'm sure my wife doesn't feel the same about having her in-laws so close, but I would choose family.
What's a Spanish word or expression that you really like?
Now, the Spanish love to swear meaning they use bad language. So I will try to avoid the bad language. I think here in Almeria, you kind of learn how to speak loudly as well, and how to speak with the local accent. So I would just say something friendly like, "Oye, socio, ¿qué dice?" That means,
sounds
hey,
very authentic.
Yeah, hey, my friend, what do you say? But that is a way of saying, hey, what's up?
And maybe it's not entirely appropriate for you, but Real Madrid or Barcelona?
Oof. Rayo Vallecano. That's, for those who don't follow football, that's the third team of Madrid. I'm not into the big rivalry because, of course, everyone in Spain chooses one of the two big teams, or if you want to be different, you might choose Atleti, meaning Atletico Madrid. But I am Rayo Vallecano or my local team, Almeria.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom. Now, just before we leave, as I understand, you've been making social media content like YouTube videos. I think I've seen a couple of YouTube channels where you're on. And you make content, as I understand, for people who are learning English or want to make improvements with their English. What kind of content do you make, and how can people find your work if they're interested?
Well, the content has evolved with the years. The accounts that are active now, I'm on Instagram and I'm on TikTok. With the handle, it's on next to my name here on screen, Study for English, or on Instagram, it's study_for_English, and that's the number 4 rather than the word FOR. That's where you can find short form content. It could be typically for students between B1 and advanced level, so I'm often looking at idioms, phrasal verbs, or tricky kind of grammar or specific vocabulary. But right now, Glyn, I'm writing a book, and it's going to be especially for B2 students, the younger generation who may find it hard to read enough. Of course, to pass your exams, you do need to be a good reader. Reading is really the foundation of giving you the understanding of grammar, speaking, listening. But, of course, with these mobile phones these days, nobody wants to read. So I've taken a lot of interesting stories, funny, true stories. Some of them are hilarious, some of them are shocking, some of them are cringe-worthy, meaning they make you feel awkward, embarrassed. And I've rewritten them, adapted them, so they are a suitable level for B2 students, and there will be exercises attached too, so you can revise, reinforce the particular language points that's in them. I'm hoping to publish the book in the next 2 or 3 months. That will be available on in paperback from Amazon, but also as a digital book. And to get it, they can come to my website, studyforenglish.com. I will have a link available offering a 50% discount for pre-sales.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm definitely a believer that reading in another language is so important for language acquisition and, reading stuff that we are interested in. I love that feeling when you're doing something in another language and for a moment you forget and you think, I'm using that other language. And I think you definitely need that compelling input. You need that really exciting story or cringeworthy story, as you mentioned. So yeah, it sounds like an awesome idea. I will put a link to your TikTok, to your Instagram, and to your website in the description below. So if anybody's interested in checking out more from Tom, then please do check out those links below. Tom, it's been a pleasure to see you. It's been a while since we've spoken. Thank you so much for taking part. It's been a really, really interesting experience.
Thank you, Glenn. Keep me in mind if you do the 90s UK episode.
Maybe we'll have a whole group of us from the 90s for this one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tom.
I wish that I could